So the last thing I want to make a video about is about poverty traps, and then the rest of the stuff I'm going to leave kind of to the reading or the text part of the learning unit to talk about it. So we want to talk about a poverty trap. So the basic idea of the poverty trap, I'm going to talk about asset poverty trap. Um, there's other types of poverty trap. For example, there can be a nutritional poverty trap. So if somebody's too poor, for example, they won't get enough food, or if they don't get enough food, they can't eat enough to work hard. But if they can't work hard, they can't be productive, in which case their income remains low, and then the cycle continues. Okay, so there is a nutrition-based poverty trap that is also pretty common to see in the literature. I'm just going to go over the asset-based poverty trap that they talk about in the textbook. So these things I chose to go over in the videos is basically because I think they're a little bit more difficult to understand. And so I thought you probably would want something besides just reading, right? You probably want maybe somebody to demonstrate it to you. Okay, so first I'm going to show you with no poverty trap, okay, what it looks like. So what I mean by poverty trap is there's some number that if you, in your assets, an asset, if you fall below that, you won't be able to recover. Okay, that's what we're talking about by a poverty trap. So let me actually write that before I go on. So there's some, if there's a poverty trap, there's some amount of assets, of productive assets, that if you fall below, you can't recover. That's a poverty trap. And we're talking for individuals. That we're talking for individuals, not for countries. Later on, I'll give you a little reading that has to do with whole countries. But this right now, I'm just talking about individuals. So there's a poverty trap for an individual. If you fall below that, you can't recover. And so they had an example in the textbook. They were talking about Burkina Faso, and during a severe drought, one of their main assets was their livestock, and they would try to hold on to their livestock because they felt that even if it meant not eating enough during that period of time. And that was because people felt that if they fell below a certain level of holdings of livestock, they would be too poor to recover, right? And they would be in a permanent extreme poverty that was maybe not recoverable. And so that's the idea. So so I want to just look at the econ model side of this idea. Okay, so again, this class is not trying to get too technical. And so I'm not going to emphasize these things, but I kind of want to show them to you. Okay, so the main idea explained in words is the key point for this course. But I just want to show you these things to you rather than every time there's a graph or a equation, we just skip over it, right? So I just want to show it to you, and it might help some of you to understand the idea, and others might understand the text-based explanation in words that goes along with it better. Okay, so if we don't have a poverty trap, what would that look like? Okay, so the poverty trap and no poverty trap is related to how do today's assets relate to tomorrow's assets. Okay, so here's the symbols we're going to use. So AT, that's your assets now. So again, assets are like productive assets. It could be machines, or you can, for simplicity, just think of, for example, livestock that they had in the classroom example, in the textbook example. And then there's some line I'll put here. Mine might not be exact. I probably should have measured it, but oh well. This is a 45-degree line. 45-degree line means this. I'll erase this in just a second. It means AT and AT plus 1 are equal. So that's along this line, the assets now and the assets next period are equal. This is not what's going to happen, but this is just showing visually where that is. So if you're along this line, then you're not going to change. You're going to stay in that spot. Your assets now and your assets next period will be exactly the same. So you're not going to go up. You're not going to go down. Okay. So this would be a point to compare to. So let's suppose so our assets today help influence our productivity for tomorrow. That's the idea. So let's suppose our function of how today's assets determine tomorrow's assets looks like this. Then there's no poverty trap. And so, well, why is there no poverty trap? Well, that's because today's assets, so like say now here, mean we're going to have more assets in the future. So they're going to grow. So like if you take the simple example of you have some goats, well, your goats are going to have babies, and next year you're going to have more goats. Okay. And so we're going to go to here. And then that is going to lead to more goats. And we'll go to here. Okay, you get the idea. So each time is more than the time before. And so we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going up this line. So we're going up, and we're going up, and we're going up this line until we get to here. Okay, so if you start below here, even if so, then you're just gonna catch. Eventually, you're gonna get back to there. Okay, eventually you're gonna go back. Okay, so you're gonna keep growing. So this, and then if you started above for some reason, you wouldn't be able to maintain it, right? So if we gave you 5,000 goats, you're not gonna have enough land and resources and water and everything else, and find the labor to take care of them. So your goat herd is gonna get smaller and smaller until it reaches this. But there's gonna be a steady state. And if we, which is, given the current technology, this is the most assets you're going to be able to hold in this economy. But the key idea is if we were to fall below, so let's suppose you are here at the steady state and then a big drought hits and you lose most of your goats and you go all the way back to here. Well, then you will just slowly recover along the line. So you would just slowly recover along this line, and you'll eventually get back to where you started. Okay, so in that case, that's no poverty trap, right? You can recover from any shock. Okay, so that's what it looks like with no poverty trap. You can recover from any shock. So how does it look different if there's a poverty trap? So if there's a poverty trap, then there's some level, and if you fall below that level, you don't go forwards, you go backwards. So your herd is too small to be feasible, and then it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you might go down to zero and just be in abject, dire poverty. Okay, so let's look at what it looks like graphically with a poverty trap. So no poverty trap means even if you fall below, you can recover because you can grow your assets over time up to some point. Okay, if there's a poverty trap, you can't, if you fall below some minimum level, you can't grow your assets. Okay, this is the idea. So let's look what this looks like graphically. Okay, so the basic idea is going to be the same. This is still assets now. Okay, so this is now, and we still got our assets next year. Okay, this is next year. And I'll still draw the 45-degree line. So remember, along the 45-degree line, the assets this year are equal to the assets next year. Okay, but now our asset function looks like this. And so this part is below the line. So what does that mean to be below the line? Well, being below the line means, let's draw it. Let's suppose we start here. This is our A1. Well, this is our A2. So that means we're too low. Our assets are too low to reproduce themselves. And so we are going to fall further. So we are going to go this way. And then our A2, even lower. So now we're going to fall further. So we fall below some minimum standard, and then we can't recover. And so we are going to just get poorer and poorer and poorer. So that would be like if you didn't have a minimum amount of land, for example, or some minimum amount of livestock, for example, just to keep the farming examples going. So then you would just get poorer and poorer. So basically anything beyond here, so this is the minimum threshold, anything less than that, then if you start out there, you're just going to get poorer and poorer and poorer. But if you start above that, then it's going to be just like the previous one I showed you. You're going to get higher and higher and higher. Okay, so you can grow until the steady state. Your individual assets will grow. But this one is, you're just going to fall deeper. So I can say maybe assets will shrink. Okay, so that's what we call poverty trap. So this part over here, this side is the poverty trap right here. There's the poverty trap. So what happens, to put it in the Where if you start there, your assets are just too low, and you're just going to get poorer and poorer. You're going to have to. So if your piece of land is too small, and you can't produce enough, so then you have to start selling little pieces of land to buy food, and then pretty soon your land's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's not enough to support you, and it's just going to fall deeper and deeper into poverty. That's the idea. And so if this is true, if there is some minimum threshold, then let's suppose a family is here, like here, right now. So this is where we are. We start here, and then we're going to be okay, except for, and this is what the textbook was talking about in that section, except for if a disaster hits, and this disaster was to push us below this threshold, we might never recover because we'll just go backwards after that. And so they were discussing about the families in Burkina Faso being really hesitant to sell off their livestock even during really big times of hardship, and was because they were worried that if they fall below some minimum threshold, they may not be able to recover. Okay, and so we'll come back to this idea of a poverty trap in a couple of ways. So we'll come back to this idea of poverty trap for individuals when we're talking about individual poverty alleviation measures next week. But I'm also going to have you do a little reading and a little debate about whether or not there's also poverty traps for countries, where a country could be too poor that they can't potentially grow and from that. And there's kind of a debate between these two economists named Sachs and Jeffrey Sachs and another named William Easterly that I'll have you read about that.